Our social media feeds are filled with the top percentile of athletes, models, and fitness gurus. This constant bombardment can lead some down the dark path of disordered eating and unnecessary self-flagellation. That being said, there is a healthy balance we need to strike that pushes us to eat healthier and is grounded in true self-confidence. My guest today is Marcus from Strong Not Starving. He's a body image and stress management coach with a background in fitness and disordered eating. Marcus and I delve into a wide array of topics, including if commenting on someone else's body is ever okay, Marcus's journey with body image and fitness, the impact of body composition tests, internal versus external validation, the impact of compliments on individuals with body image issues, the importance of down-regulating emotions, managing intrusive thoughts, OCD, and catastrophizing, Marcus's and my experience as a musician, the challenges of touring and managing stage fright, managing ego in the music industry, and overcoming binge eating through emotional regulation. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Marcus. Hey everyone, just a quickie before we get into the conversation. The podcast is always going to be free, so I'm never going to ask you to pay for anything, but if you could do me the kindness of subscribing and maybe leaving a review, that would mean the absolute world to me. Thank you and enjoy the episode. What's brought you to where you are today and what you do?
I struggled a lot with nutrition, fitness, body image, all that kind of stuff when I first started wanting to get fitter, get stronger. And I've just set out really to solve the problems that I encountered along the way. So I ran into probably, 15 years of struggles with like eating disorders, disordered eating, body image issues that, really derailed my life and held me back from the outcomes that I was trying to achieve. And so I'm doing my best to address a whole lot of helpful conversations, specifically around nutrition and body image, that aren't being had quite as much.
Like, how did that manifest for you? Like, were you like overweight, or was it an emotional thing, or?
I started off wanting to kind of prove myself in the arena of sport in high school. Like, it was a very competitive environment at my school. We were put through a lot of fitness tests. I was put through body composition tests outside of school, strict diets, all that kind of stuff. And I guess it all started because I was a year younger than most of the other guys in my year level at school. And obviously, at that age, a year is a long time in terms of development. So I was competing against other guys or thrown into the same ring with other guys who could grow a beard at the age of like 14 and all this kind of stuff. And so it started off through kind of wanting to prove myself, thinking that that's what a man should be. A man should be strong. A man should be good at sport. A man should be competitive. Like that's what I needed to be. And it just very quickly became all about body image. So the journey of training and dieting and optimal performance in terms of athletic performance just very quickly became all about image. And that took me down a really dark path.
Yeah, man, that's like what sorry, I just had a Chrome update just say, well, you need to update your browser. I'm like, fucking hell now. So it just totally threw me off. What sport were you involved in? What sports?
I was rowing at the time. So the school I went to, high school that I went to in Australia, like how every school has like their flagship sport.
Uh-huh.
My school was Australian rules football in the winter and then rowing in the summer. Of course, like there were other sports, but the guys' football team was treated particularly, they were treated special. And then the rowing teams, like the highest ranking rowing teams were treated with reverence. So it was kind of like a family thing. Like my mum said, oh, other people in the family row, you should row, whatever. And I kind of did it out of spite at first, just to kind of prove that I could. And so it was rowing, really competitive rowing, that started it for me. But it's not really the fault of rowing. It's just the fact that that path very quickly led to body composition tests and fitness magazines. And, you know, I'm saying magazines, not social media, because this was when I was at high school in the 1600s. And, and like, and yeah, obviously not knowing that most people I was looking at in terms of that space were using performance enhancing drugs and not being transparent about it, expecting certain things of myself, being very confused as to why I didn't look like the guys on the magazine after I did all the 12-week, 6-month programs that they were selling. So I wouldn't really, rowing kind of got me started, but I wouldn't really blame rowing as a sport.
Yeah, it's like that was always kind of within you, that kind of propensity to go to that extreme level. Would you say? Would that be fair?
Yeah, absolutely. It's
Like, please continue.
I was just going to say, it's since doing the work that I've done and becoming much more informed on things like eating disorders, struggling with food, there is like the genetic predisposition to obsessive compulsive leanings and behavior. That's one of the kind of early warning signs or red flags that show up in people who are more susceptible to struggling with eating disorders, disordered eating, often body image, that kind of stuff. So I definitely had that in me, that leaning towards obsessive compulsive behavior, even from a young age.
Can you like tell me like practically what did that look like?
As in, what did
your compulsive eat? You know, what did all those negative behaviors like? How did you act them out?
it was increasing levels of dietary restriction and diet rigidity. So the amount that I was eating kept kind of getting lower and lower as I failed to see the results that I was expecting to see. And the number of foods or the range of foods that I was allowing myself to eat, again, got more and more restrictive over time as I, failed to see the results that I was expecting to see. And I would stick to these dietary parameters and training parameters just rigidly, no matter how I was feeling, no matter what the outcome was, because it very quickly became not so much about it being outcome focused as it was like a compulsion, like feeling like I had to stick to these things because I had to achieve this result. And I was completely uninformed about what really went into the results that I was trying to achieve. So it was this mix of different things, but OCD and a leaning towards kind of feeling like I was doing these things from a very compulsive place started to play into it. And I would feel very, very anxious, very, very distressed if I was unable to tick boxes associated with certain things that were part of my routine, whether it be a training session, whether it be eating in a very particular way. And yeah, it just started to dominate my life.
Mm. And like you talked about parameters, like with those parameters, was it body comp stuff that was set from your coach, or were you defining those parameters?
It was body composition stuff that was kind of set by a professional within the space that I was sent to help me with this. They were sent, or I was sent to them to help with, diet and training and everything like that. And they gave me a body composition test. And I just expected to see linear progress with those body composition tests. And, the first time I got one, I saw big improvements between the first time and the second time because I was very new to training. I was very new to dieting. And then when I didn't see those same improvements and those same changes the next time around, I got very, very distressed. Like, what am I doing wrong? This is terrible. I'm a shitty person. I'm a failure. Like, I need to try harder. So it's not like the body composition targets were set by a coach or by someone of authority, but I didn't have anyone to guide me through what it was to be looking at body composition tests and to know what to expect. So I was kind of coming up with my own ambiguous expectations about what progress should look like.
Right. So they didn't give you like, oh, you need to be at X amount body fat, or
I understood through listening to fitness models, professionals within the fitness space, what body composition or, what body fat levels were associated with being very lean. So I was kind of shooting for those. But this is where it became very much about appearance. I started listening to fitness models rather than athletic coaches. And so I was aiming for body fat percentage targets that were more associated with fitness models than athletes.
yeah. So you ended up like pegging into a round hole, like your own expectations that you kind of like found through culture.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, man, it's interesting because I've got a pretty good relationship with food and like body image. Meh.
Yeah, it's a journey.
Yeah, and yeah, there's just so much there that resonates now because, like, I didn't do sports or anything at school. Like I did music, and I've come into like athletic endeavors like later in life. So I don't know if you have you heard of High Rocks.
No, I haven't.
So that's like something that I'm into. It's a form of what they call fitness racing.
Oh, actually, yeah, I've got a couple of friends that I used to PT with
Mm,
that do that. Yeah.
yeah, it's like pretty trendy right now, and it's running around doing and then in between you're doing ergs, you're doing lunges and heavy stuff and the rest of it, and it's awesome. And when I started training for it, before I'd done that, I'd always kind of loosely gone with like the sort of bodybuilder kind of bro splits kind of agenda. And then I started training for this. I got a coach, and it was just a totally different thing to what I've done before. I
Mm.
started training on performance rather than visual aesthetic.
Yeah.
Um, and that was very freeing to me. Just to kind of let go of like the emphasis on how big your biceps are or whatever.
Mm.
Um, and so that was last year, and I was sort of like nailing my diet. In terms of like in a really positive way, actually. I decided to go with like a primal sort of paleo approach. There's no like basically no wheat was probably and it worked really well for me. But I was quite lean, but I was performing well, and that was the goal. And don't get me wrong, like I would have liked to have been like bigger, but like my natural kind of physique is slimmer. Like I can't remember whatever morph that is. And anyhow, and then so this year I've had like an off season, and then the whole kind of meta strategy with this sport is kind of like if you're more of a runner, then you want to put on some weight in the off season, and if you're more of a big guy and endomorph, you want to focus on your endurance during the off season. So throughout the summer, that's basically what I've been doing, like heavy lifts, eating lots. Um, but if along comes for the ride is that little bit of extra belly fat, and I've totally gone off on one now, but I might as well continue. And someone said to me, I heard someone say to me at a competition like this summer, which was just an off-season thing, and someone said, "Oh, yeah, I don't want to get beaten by Jace's dad bod." And I was like,
Oof. Like that's oof.
yeah. And it was like, it's a difficult one, man, because I'm like, when I look at my body composition and I look at the photographs, the videos from, for example, that competition, because there's a lot of tops off and there's a lot of
Of
guys
course.
there that are likely on PDs. Um, although whether that's just a way for those that aren't jacked to kind of like take them down a peg, I don't know. But like, um, where am I going with this? But it's just getting that balance of like, well, it's kind of got a point. Like, maybe I could like, maybe I could lose like a little bit, and then you've got like this Jekyll Hyde
Hmm.
on each side of you that's going kind of, well, like, look, you're off season, you're eating to fuel for performance, let go of that, let go of the ego. And then I have the other side that's going, maybe it's got a point. Like, maybe you are like eating a bit too much. Are you? And this is the one thing I'm sort of like constantly juggling at the moment is, and actually because I'm still eating wheat, because I found that like I perform better by having some wheat in my diet.
You don't
So,
say.
yeah, it's a really good carb source, but I just bloat. But if I took it out, I know I'd get really lean pretty quick. And yeah, I don't know what the point I'm making here is, but yeah, I'd like. Have you any thoughts on that from your perspective? And like, how can we pass out that kind of those two conflicting things and come to it in a healthy and objective manner that's good for our health? There you go. That's a long question.
Hmm. I think challenging situations and difficult feelings surrounding body image are not going anywhere. They're part of our society at this point, and if we step into anything that resembles the fitness space, we're going to get all that and then some and then some more. So it's going to be amplified. And so these challenges aren't going anywhere. They're things that we're going to have to deal with. And I find it to be like the most realistic approach, if we choose to be part of this environment, if we choose to go down that path, is to acknowledge that, yeah, these challenges are going to be there. The difficult feelings are going to be there. We're going to feel torn between what we know is objectively better in terms of performance and how we feel and what we need to do, as opposed to bending to body image pressure and that kind of stuff. And it essentially becomes up to us to cultivate a really great mindset and an ability to deal with difficult emotions. Because when we go down this path of improving fitness, wanting to exist in that space, there's often this illusion of like, I'm going to get really fit and I'm going to be more confident and I'm going to have less bad feelings. And it's like, not really. You might get more confident, but there's going to be just as many bad feelings as ever. They're just going to be different bad feelings to what you usually might be used to. So we've got to get accustomed to dealing with them and managing them and making good decisions regardless of how they appear. Because if we don't, then those bad feelings and those difficult thoughts are going to start making decisions for us that are going to lead to very, very poor outcomes.
Mm. Yeah, it makes me think about like validation, like internal versus external. Like, do we need validation?
Mm.
Is it okay to need a little bit of validation? I don't know. Like, with that example for me, um I have actually put on a bit more mass. So I went out the other week round town, and I wasn't topless, so you can see everything. And I was wearing a shirt, so like a shirt, the way that kind of like cuts down is quite flattering if you've got the cut right, and it's sort of like, provided your chest is like slightly out, and and I was like, and I got a few compliments, like, and said, oh yeah, like you look like looking pretty stacked, and I was like, fuck yeah. And
And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with accepting a compliment and being like, oh yeah, that made me feel good.
yeah, and it made me think, and I was like, did I need that? Because it like, are we doing a deal with the devil by taking those compliments?
Interesting.
Do you know what I mean? Like,
It's my full-time job is having conversations with people surrounding their experiences with this exact thing. And one of the most important things when it comes to compliments and validation in terms of body image is to recognize where we are on that spectrum of our own journey. Like, there are some people who are in a really rough place with body image, who, even when someone compliments them, they don't receive it as a compliment because it triggers a whole lot of really difficult stuff going on for them. And if you haven't experienced that, it's very hard to understand it, because it's very natural to think, well, hey, I was saying something nice. Like, what's the problem? But it's very difficult to really comprehend how someone who's maybe struggling with an eating disorder or really down the rabbit hole with this stuff thinks and feels in relation to compliments. So that doesn't mean that nobody should give anybody compliments ever, and it doesn't mean that it's wrong to enjoy a compliment or take a compliment. Some people say, oh, you should never comment on other people's bodies ever. And I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess I see the logic behind that, but also it's a very hard thing to police and enforce, like we can draw awareness around this stuff, but we also need to be realistic about what to expect when we go into the public space. And when we're maybe not in a place where even compliments bring about very difficult or negative feelings, it's helpful to look at compliments in terms of body image through the lens of like, this is nice if I receive it, but I must make sure that I don't need it. It must be something that I'm not relying on. Almost like you don't want to rely on pre-workout supplement. Like every time you train, you having a pre-workout is great sometimes, but you need to be able to train without pre-workout.
yes.
And if you get to the point where you're relying on stimulants in order to train, then that starts to, that's a dicey place to be. And it's the same thing with kind of these compliments and that kind of stuff. Like, if you're in a place where you can receive a compliment and it feels nice, then cool. But we need to make sure that we're not living on a staple diet of compliments, and that's what we're looking for, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I fucking love a training analogy.
I'll do my best to
Honestly,
bring in more.
yeah, like training, like football analogies are good as well. I love a football analogy, but yeah, training analogies are so good. And I was thinking about this last night, and there's so many things that you learn about training that can be mapped onto any like productivity, like goal setting. So yeah, just like a wider point. I appreciate that. Um, I think also it's like there's no one size fits all, is there?
Yeah.
Everyone's going to receive a compliment in a different way. I think like we forget like how much we're shaped by culture and like family. So like a common thing in my family would be like, "You're looking well. Have you lost weight?" Or that's the kind of meta of kind of just in general, if you weigh less, you're looking well.
Yeah.
Which, in the correct hands, that's fine. But if you like, went to someone with an eating disorder and said that, not cool.
Yeah, it's
There's not the
funny.
right. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, it's funny you should mention that phrase, like you're looking well, because that phrase can be received in so many different ways. And I know from those of us who've struggled with eating disorders or the kind of situation where, we try to lose as much weight as possible, lose as much body fat as possible, and people around us start becoming aware of that. In that situation, when people say, "Oh, you're looking well," part of our mind goes, "Holy shit, are you saying that I've put on weight? Fuck!" And
Oh,
it freaks out. So it's in the opposite direction. So
really?
when you're talking to someone in like eating disorder recovery, for example, and one of their family says like, "You're looking well,"
Oh,
their brain just goes, "Fuck!" Like, so,
wow,
because
yeah.
there's so many different ways that we can take these things. And of course, I don't want to make it sound like I believe that we should walk out into the world expecting everyone to change to accommodate our own needs. We can build awareness, we can help educate in a compassionate way as much as possible, but it's on us as well to regulate our response to the world.
Mm, yeah, like you've got to foster that resilience within yourself.
Mm.
Um, but obviously, it's nice if you're able to have the self-awareness to when you're commenting on someone else. Because, like, I know it's like I still do it because I've grown up with it. Um, and I'll say to like one of my friends in the gym, I'm like, "Yo, fucking hell, you're looking hench," and I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah." And then that happened like with one of my girlfriends, but she's literally going through a phase of trying to put on weight through a plan. But then she's like, "Oh, like I look fat. I feel like I look fat," and then I'm like, "You don't. Like you look amazing." But then I'm like, fucking hell, like what am I doing? I'm like reinforcing, and then I'm like, you don't want to be, and I'm like, shit, am I like emphasizing too much? Like, why am I talking about her weight? It's a fucking minefield. But like, obviously, it's coming from a place of like love. Like, I'm trying to say, I can see that you're putting in work to gain a bit of muscle, as instructed by your coach. Like, it's working.
Yeah.
Um, but then there's that little voice that's going, "You shouldn't be commenting, Jason. It's nothing to do with you." like,
It's hard. It's really hard to have conversations without starting to overthink it, right?
mm, yeah. Okay. So, what did the work look like for you?
That's a really good question. You know what? I've never been asked that question in that way before, but I know that broadly, the work came down to understanding that what I was doing was not going to bring about the outcome that I desired. Like that was the fundamental first step, to look at what I was trying to achieve, to really build a lot of self-awareness around what it was that I was trying to achieve, not just in terms of the body I wanted, but really how I thought that achieving a specific thing in terms of my body was going to make me feel. So if we dissect it a little bit, it it wasn't really that I was aiming for, a body that looked a certain way. I was aiming to feel a certain way through the vehicle of making my body look a certain way.
Mm,
And one of the big first steps that I had to take was to be aware of that and to realize that everything that I was doing was not going to produce that outcome. I had to realized that what I was doing was not working, not only from a physically sustainable perspective, but from a psychological and emotional perspective. So I had to be willing to let go. The work for me came with dealing with a lot of distress and difficult feelings and anxiety surrounding the experience of letting go of a bunch of really unhelpful things first, and rediscovering or recultivating my sense of identity and self, and kind of refinding myself, a version of myself that didn't hinge on looking a very particular way in order to feel like I deserved to exist. So that's where kind of the first steps came in. But it was a lot of, for lack of a better way to put it, a lot of distress tolerance, learning how to manage emotion, deal with emotion, clean up my mental environment, come correct with certain mindsets when maybe large parts of my mind were trying to tell me stories that were really unhelpful. I had to go, wait, how true is that really? And start to work through a bunch of that.
What was the outcome that you were looking for?
I first started to try and make changes when I realized that I was just in so much pain physically from the kind of training and dieting that I was asking myself to do, and mentally just from the level of isolation that caused, that I realized I just had to change something. So the original outcome that I was looking for was just, I don't want to be in pain anymore. And I'm willing to do whatever is necessary to make that happen. So yeah,
Just
that was
emotional or like physical pain, both?
both. The kind of training that I was putting myself through, overtraining, lack of great recovery practices, malnutrition, essentially.
This is still rowing.
No, this is in my late 20s. So this is, I was rowing for a little while in high school, and then this whole journey with fitness and all this other stuff just became all about the gym. So
So this is like bro splits.
yeah, like high volume, like bro splits, bodybuilder training, all that kind of stuff, but just really badly programmed.
Mm.
You know, there is a helpful way and an unhelpful way to do that kind of training. So I don't want to make it sound like I'm vilifying any particular kind of training, because they are all really good if you do them correctly. But I was not.
But
Uh,
how were you not doing them correctly? Just out of interest, like what was it that just if anyone's listening, they might be doing the same thing.
yeah. Well, for a start, I was completely neglecting the role that my stress levels and total lack of recovery practices outside of the gym were affecting how my body would feel inside the gym. So, stress plus recovery equals growth, physically, emotionally, psychologically, whatever. Most of us are quite good at giving ourselves doses of stress, but we're not that great at recovery. So I was putting myself through really intense, very high volume training sessions, then also like not sleeping, not like eating properly, not having great relationships in my life, like expecting things of myself that weren't really congruent with a healthy human being. So yeah, does that answer the question? I'm sorry, or did I go off on a
No, no,
tangent
no,
there?
no. Yeah. So what you're saying is, yeah, you were just training hard and then not recovering, which is very common because people get into a cycle where they go, "Oh, I'm being lazy. It's rest day today, but well, yeah, I'll just do biceps because that's not too much of a stress or whatever." Or they don't know how to relax. So the idea of doing something that is like more serotonergic rather than like dopaminergic is just difficult, right? And I think so many of us will connect with that. Like, um, yeah, like today's a rest day for me. I've got a race tomorrow, and my coach said to me, "Big rest day tomorrow," and like even that, like kind of go, "Oh." Yeah, it's like, oh fucking hell, like how's it gonna go? Because you can have a really good rest day where yeah, it's I think it's harder if you're the type of person who has that drive to be training hard and achieving things to then go, ah, it is not easy. Um, so yeah, I can relate and agree. And what do they say? Like the muscles actually grow when you're resting, not when you're doing it. And I suppose this is probably the downside of like the so-called pump. The good side to the pump is you get like a visual preview into like if I keep training like this for like the next 9 months, I might look like this.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
downside of that is you equate that to like I need to be pumped all the time to keep up that self-image.
Essentially being able to wind down, one of the key differences, there it is. I'm sorry to anyone who can hear that. One of the key differences between amateur level athletes and elite level athletes is actually the skill involved in being able to down regulate on purpose. So this is something that this isn't just anecdotal. This is something that there are studies on. There are actual skills and practices that are used for even the special forces. Like there's a event called biathlon, which is a combination of cross country skiing and target shooting. So this is used in
That
the
sounds
military.
so fun.
Yeah, I know, right? So, but essentially, the goal of this is like it was originally used in the military, I think, but the goal of biathlon is to have intervals of high altitude cross country skiing followed by intervals of long range shooting. And what that requires is an athlete or a soldier to be able to complete their interval of cross country skiing and then lower their heart rate and down regulate on purpose to
Yeah.
then be able to shoot with a steady aim and then upregulate again for the next round of skiing. So it is this actual practiced ability to peak and down regulate on purpose and then peak and down regulate on purpose. And I love using this example because it applies to sports, it applies to training, it even applies to work. And like I work with people in the corporate space a lot in very high stress environments, and we have a lot of conversations about the ability to come correct and peak when you need to and then come down from that. Otherwise, you finish work at 5 and you might leave work at 5 or 6, but physiologically and psychologically you're still at work until 11 p.m. at night. So we need to cultivate this ability to peak when we need to peak and relax when we need to relax. And there's an actual skill involved in being able to do that on purpose rather than just going through life at the whim of wherever our nervous system and thoughts take us.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that's so cool. Like two things. One is like I love the idea of that like training modality, finding something where like shooting, where you need for your heart rate to be low. Um yeah, fascinating. Like I wonder what you could like supplant that with. Maybe you could do it on. I could probably do it on my watch. Sorry, we're going like full into training now, but like, yeah, I could do it
Yeah,
on my
that's cool.
watch and be like intervals. Like, so the next interval has to be that I get my heart rate lower than so and so. Otherwise, it starts like beeping at me, which I kind
Yeah.
of do anyways. But yeah, so that was that one. Secondly, I found like a good analogy. I thought of an analogy there, and it's to do with the erg. So like the row.
Mm-hmm.
If you're rowing all the time and that fan's always running, then you'll just burn out. The
Exactly.
thing about the row or the ski is like you need to hit the fan, recover, hit the fan, recover. And it's like the same thing as what we're talking about. You have to have the recovery. If you're hitting the fan all the time, like you're just going to like fucking explode.
Exactly. I love talking about this because it has so many applications and so many parallels just across the board. There's like the microcycle, mesocycle, macrocycle, whatever. You can apply this to your work intensity within any given hour, within any given day, within any given week, within any given month. And just this ability to up or down regulate depending on where we choose to be rather than where we just kind of find ourselves is so important. Just like the other day, for example, I was in the park. I've got a dog. I mention my dog all the time on like every collab that I do. Huge fan of my dog. And like he and I were in the park. I take him out every day to throw the ball for him for a while, and we hang out in the park, and he's my best bud. And there was a dude riding his bike through the park like ridiculously fast. Like there are like kids and dogs and everything everywhere, and this dude was just booking it through the park. And I threw the ball for my dog. It went off in one direction. This guy on the bike changed direction. Long story short, he came really close to hitting my dog. He didn't, but he came really close. Now, within about 10 seconds, maybe even less of that happening, my mind had gone into absolute overdrive into all these kind of like worst case hypothetical scenarios like, oh my God, what an asshole. What if he had actually hit my dog or a kid? If he'd hit my dog, like I would have gotten into this huge argument with him. I would have had to take the dog to the vet. They're like, oh my God, what if I got so mad with this guy? Like, what if I hurt him or something like that? And then there would be a court case. And then, oh my God, my mind fully went into catastrophization. And because of my history with OCD, intrusive thoughts and catastrophizing kind of come as a package with OCD. There's something that people with OCD will often need to manage this. So that's kind of where my mind went. Instant worst case scenario. And part of me was just furious about this guy like riding his bike so quickly through the park, so irresponsibly around like dogs and kids. But at the end of the day, nothing actually had happened. And I had to be on a call with a client within 5 or 10 minutes time. So at that moment, despite the fact that a large portion of me, a big part of my mind felt justified in the anger that I was experiencing, I had to be able to willingly choose to down-regulate from that emotion because, one, it wasn't helpful because nothing actually happened and I was just catastrophizing, which it never helps. And two, I couldn't show up to a call with my client in that state. I needed to be calm. I needed to be resourceful. So in that moment, I had to choose, despite the fact that part of me wanted to stay angry, I had to choose not to be. I had to choose where to direct my thoughts, and I had to choose to start practicing certain things to down-regulate my physiological response to the emotion that I was trying to process and kind of move through. And when we talk about things like biathlon and being able to up or down regulate in athletic competition, this is where it translates in terms of just like everyday life. Being able to choose our reactions better.
Do you have any tools or tactics for down regulating in an OCD spiral such as that?
Yeah, the thing that I found really helpful is grounding in physical sensations. So being able to, firstly, there's a mindset part of it, and then there's a physiological part of it. If we neglect one of these two things, we're not going to be successful. So we have to pull the biggest lever we have in terms of physical regulation to acknowledge that every emotion, every feeling comes with a physiological state within the body. So breathing is the most readily accessible way to change our physiological state. When we start to change our breathing patterns, it doesn't work instantly. It's not like having a shot of Valium or something like that. It's not going to just pull a big lever from it for us and create an immediate change. We need to commit to it for quite a few minutes, understanding that it will create a change. So first of all, acknowledge the physiological response within the body, start to regulate our breathing patterns, long exhales, mindful breathing, all that kind of stuff. And then take charge of where our attention goes in terms of our mind. Like, our mind is going to be drawn to the intrusive thoughts, to the triggering emotion, whatever it is. And we need to be able to willingly and repeatedly guide our attention away from where we don't want it to go and towards where we actually do want it to go. If you've tried this in the past and found it to be nothing but frustrating, like it didn't work, and it just felt like you were fighting your own mind, I understand completely, because it usually doesn't work the first few times you try it. It's something, we need to look at this like a skill. It is something that we get better at over time. And I completely understand that the first few times we do this, it sucks. And you feel like it doesn't work, and it's very easy to get frustrated, but we don't get better at it until we put ourselves in a position where we need to practice it over and over and over and over again. And I find physical sensations very helpful to ground my attention in when it comes to where to bring my attention in these moments. I might bring my attention to the feeling, just the literal physical feeling of breathing, of rubbing my hands together. Some people do the 5 things I can see, 4 things I can hear, 3 things I can smell, touch, whatever. That can be a helpful way to do it. So you were asking me about the thing with touring.
Yeah, tell me about your time as a musician.
Yeah, it's amazing in hindsight how that complemented what I'm currently doing. I've always had kind of one foot in the fitness and nutrition space and one foot in the music space. In my 20s, fitness and working in gyms and everything, that was always kind of like my day job, while I worked with bands and everything like that at night and on weekends. And I got an opportunity, or I created an opportunity by very intentionally moving over to the UK in 2016, where more work for musicians is available than in Australia. Like, Australia has a great music scene, but there's just a higher volume of work available in the UK because of population density and all that kind of thing. So
is that right? I didn't know that.
Yeah, well, if you want to play a show, if you want to play a week of shows in big cities in Australia, you're like, the distances between large cities in Australia is massive, whereas you can drive a couple of hours in the UK. You can play Brighton one night, London the next. You can play Manchester, Leeds, Birmingham. Like, it's much more congruent with touring. So I moved over here, started auditioning, got a job with a band that was doing their 30th anniversary world tour. So that was a band called The Wedding Present. They were like an indie rock band that was very big in the early 90s. So in the early 90s,
rings a bell.
Yeah, The Wedding Present. It's kind of like, I grew up listening to, or with bands like Blink-182 and Green Day. And so where The Wedding Present would fit in was like, maybe for you and I, there was like Blink-182 and Green Day, but like back in the day in the early 90s, it was like the Smiths and The Wedding Present. Like, The Wedding Present wasn't quite as big as the Smiths, but they were kind of like the slightly louder, more indie, grittier,
So like
kind
post-punk.
Yeah, post-punk indie rock type thing. And so they were, they're still going, or a version of that band is still going. It's run by the guy who was the lead singer. He's kept the band going all these years with different lineups, and they needed a new guitar player. I'd just come off a bunch of tours with a previous band, and it was just a good fit. So I was working with that band full time for like 18 months, and it was pretty much like 3 weeks on, 2 weeks off, 2 weeks on, 1 week off, touring the UK, Europe, North America. We even did Australia and New Zealand once. And yeah, it was a crash course in managing difficult emotions, essentially. Like, I was, yeah, thrown in the deep end with like managing stage fright and everything like that. Like, I'd played big shows before and had done all that kind of work before, but it was always very intermittent. And I'd never been in a situation where it was literally my job every night to do this and to be in front of crowds. And it it brought a whole new level of challenge, physically and mentally and emotionally, to what I was accustomed to previously, which is more of a weekend warrior type approach. You know, you'd play like on the weekends, like you'd play 1 or 2 nights on the weekends, and then maybe go on a tour like for a week or 2 weeks, like once a year. This was much more intensive, and it it forced me to really get the reps in. Like, when you're doing something every night, you get good at it. And I had to get really good at managing stage fright. I had to get really good at acknowledging the fact that no matter what I did, if we were in front of an audience of 2,000, 3,000 people, a whole bunch of people in that audience were going to dislike me on sight for reasons that I couldn't control. So making peace with the fact that some people are going to like me, some people aren't, and stiff shit, that has to be fine. And yeah, just managing doing all this kind of stuff with not much sleep and being away from friends and family and everything. So yeah, that was very much a crash course in emotional management.
So interesting. Yeah, man. I mentioned earlier that like I was a musician through school, and yeah, like I had like a lot of potential. A guitar player, singer. That's kind of like my main thing.
Nice.
And where am I going with this? Yeah, and we did. I was lucky enough to do a little tour with my college band, and it's interesting as you say that, because we could do a tour of the UK in 2 weeks,
Yeah.
like in this van, and it was like the. Interestingly, I've had two of the guys who I was in bands with on the podcast. Shout out to Kai and Christian, and yeah, it was just like such an amazing experience. I imagine it'd be very different to the sort of thing you were talking about, because we were living off cider and Burger King. Um, that was pretty much the diet. But it's 17 or whatever, you can kind of get away with it. But what I was thinking was, I wanted to ask you about like, do you drink?
Interestingly, when I was doing the more, I don't want to say casual because we were very serious about it, but when I had the band that I was with through most of my 20s and we'd do occasional tours and all this kind of stuff, yeah, I would drink amongst other things. And then when I made it my job, I noticed that, okay, that's not going to fly anymore. Like, you can't maintain that like every night. And people who try, it's a well-traveled path. Like, we know where that goes. I wasn't trying to be like Nikki Sixx. I had no interest in being some like hard partying, borderline alcoholic guitar player. I wanted to be a pro. And something that I was lucky enough to do a few tours opening for Slash's band at one point. And something that I noticed about that was, I was doing those tours when Slash was, obviously in his mid to late 40s. So he was sober. His entire band was sober. It was essentially a sober tour. And his guys, like his musicians, like they were pro. They were stone cold pro. They were lovely guys, super cool to be around. And it was just like, we have a job to do. And that job is to deliver every single night. And that really struck me. So when I started doing this like every single night, I was like, well, I can't be like hammered. I can't be hungover and dealing with the emotional instability that comes with being consistently or continuously hungover all the time. There was even like the North American tour that we did. Obviously, we did it in we drove. We weren't flying anywhere, and the distances that we had to drive between gigs in North America was much greater than we would in the UK, and the shows were scheduled for much later. So we were driving further during the day and playing shows later in the evening, which of course meant much less sleep. So I made like the tactical decision to cut out caffeine, alcohol, everything about a month before going on that tour. And I cut out caffeine specifically so that I could nap easier,
Yeah.
so that I could nap during the day in the back seat of the tour bus, and then be a little bit more fresh for when we played shows in the evening, because we'd have these experiences like, you know, we'd be playing a radio show during the day that was like live show, live audience, live recording, live broadcast, so no pressure, and then go and play a different show in the evening. So I couldn't really afford to be tired, but I knew that we were getting fuck all sleep every night. So I had to be like, all right, what can I do to make sure that I can nap regularly, that I can take what sleep I can, where I can. I even got really good at sleeping on the floor under tables backstage in like dressing rooms and that kind of stuff. Like I got really good at napping that year. And so, yeah, there was definitely a difference between doing it professionally when it came to like alcohol and caffeine and everything versus doing it occasionally.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, because when you do it for yourself, you've just got that freedom to be like, I'm the man. Like this is my band, ego, all the rest that comes in with it. Yeah, I'm gonna get fucking charged up. Um, yes, so interesting. Like, and like, what a fucking pro, by the way. Like, I love like how like methodical we were. Like, I'm gonna cut out caffeine so I can nap, and yeah, that's like some serious commitment. And I wonder like how much of an influence like Slash's band ended up having on you,
Huge.
like versus I don't know, like who are bands that still get fucked up these days? I don't know.
I
Like
don't know.
maybe
bands
a,
that bands that
maybe
we don't hear much
Oasis.
of.
They're like in the news at the moment. Um, but yeah, I can't. Most of them are sober, aren't they?
The thing is, like, I know there are a lot of people that still party hard and tour and everything like that, but that's a different thing. I don't want to make it sound like I'm being all holier than thou, like, you know, this is what I did. But there's a huge difference between being a session musician that is hired to do a particular job, like a gun for hire, versus being a member of an original band. Like,
Yes.
and that was the difference, I think, between a whole bunch of bands that, you know, we see in what I was doing. So I was a like gun for hire, like live session touring type guy. So I was employed. I had a boss. Like in the same way that Slash's musicians, they had a Slash was their boss. It was their job to show up and play perfectly every night. Well, you know, as close to perfectly as you can. Like, let's be reasonable. But I'd say they were pretty close to perfect. They were fucking amazing. And I found that really inspiring, just how professional they were, because I went through all those years of playing in the Melbourne music scene surrounded by people who were, you know, getting fucked up. And I even still have a very good friend who was very ambitious, very hardworking guy who auditioned for one of the bands that was doing well in that scene at that time. And he didn't get hired for this gig because he wasn't like an alcoholic dropout who lived in his car. Like this whole band, they would party really hard. They were all just ruins of human beings. And my friend, he was studying to be a pilot. He was a great guitar player, had the right look for the band and everything like that. But just because he didn't party hard, they were like, no, we don't want you in the band. And
Wow.
it's no surprise that if I said the name of that band, you wouldn't know who they are because they got fucking nowhere. So Yeah, it's different being a session musician because you have a job and it's your job to come correct and deliver a certain level of professionalism.
Yeah, man. That brings up like so much for me. Like all I'm thinking is, yeah, I like throughout those years and like when I got to like university, so I went to university of music and I behaved like the rock star.
We've all been there, don't worry.
I behaved like yeah. It finished my music career though. I behaved like the rock star, like when I should have been the session musician. Like I often think that like I did all the sex, drugs, and rock and roll, but without the rock and roll and more alcohol. Like, do you know what I mean? Like it was
Yeah.
all ego, and I think some of that, and I came through college and it's like this delicate balance between like self confidence and managing your ego.
Mm.
And I was constantly like flooded with like, oh, you're amazing. Like, you're going to go places like Jason's this, Jason's that. Um, and I believed my own hype. Uh, but where I went wrong is the things that got me good at playing the guitar in the first place, I just stopped doing them.
Mm.
Uh, I just totally, and I don't know why. I think there's like lots of different reasons why, but I think at the heart of it was like this huge insecurity that I wasn't good enough, anyways.
Bro,
So what's the point?
being a guitar player is so hard like that. I remember, again, like, I don't want to sound like I'm all holier than thou because I went through my years of, you know, combining alcohol and Valium before I went on stage in order to manage
Mm.
nerves, and then doing other drugs when I came off stage to bring me back up and all this kind of stuff. And comparing myself, the level of comparison that I used to give myself when I looked at other guitarists and how good they were and how crap I was and where I needed to improve. And it's oh man, it's rough.
Mm. Yeah, and you can go two ways with that, isn't it? So, from what I can hear from your story, it sounds to me like you took those things and you were like, oh, those insecurities around, oh, he's better than me, and like, how can I improve? Sounds to me like you actually did implement those things and said, okay, yeah, I need to improve here. Whereas maybe I went the other way and just went, fuck it, let's just get pissed. Like,
I mean, I'm no angel in how I handled it.
Mm,
Let's not kid ourselves. I kind of took things in a particular direction, but I almost rebelled against this idea that more technically accomplished you are, the better you are, because I'd worked with a bunch of guys who were technical geniuses as far as, you know, music is concerned, but they were also kind of, let's say socially dysfunctional.
mm-hmm.
And so when I started playing session stuff, I made it my priority not to try and be flashy. I let go of this idea that I needed to shred and be this incredible guitar player. I was just like, I'm going to learn the songs and show up. And yeah, and it was a whole journey, man. And I handled it very imperfectly. I have a lot of regrets. Like, what I put myself through in order to bring that level of what I thought was that level of professionalism to the table, I actually ruined a lot of fun for myself. I took it too far. I took
How?
it I took it too seriously, in the sense I was very much always in my head, taking everything very, very seriously. And, you know, of course, everyone has 2020 hindsight, but I was still dealing with an eating disorder at the time. I was still very insecure. And I didn't really take in the experience as much as I could have because I was too worried about just random things. I was just putting myself through a lot of needless anxiety, putting a lot of needless pressure on myself. I could have afforded to have a bit more fun than I did. And it was just a reflection of that stage of my life, like what I'd learned, what I hadn't learned, and there were still things that I needed to learn and hadn't quite got there yet. So yeah, it was a very imperfect process.
Do you think like the guitar became like a conduit for like control because your life outside of that was
It became my interface with the
Hmm.
world. Like, even as a teenager, I found social situations very difficult. I found social situations kind of confusing and difficult in my 20s as well. Like, I'd have a few drinks and, get through it and wear this mask of, the person that I wanted people to see and who I thought I needed to be. Almost created a whole other persona with someone who was kind of like more easygoing and all that kind of stuff. But on the inside, I was very type A personality, very, very hard on myself. And the guitar gave me something to communicate with the world through. It gave me a reason to be invited to the party. If I was in the band, then I had a reason to be at the party. I had a reason to be invited. I had something to talk about. People would talk to me about something. When I didn't
Mm,
have that and I was in a social situation, I'd just kind of stand around going, so is this what we do? Do we all just stand around talking about random? Is this what it is to be social? I don't understand this. So the guitar helped kind of grease the social groove. What about you? What kind of role did music play for you in the bigger picture sense?
yeah, I was just thinking about it then. Actually, it's funny you asked me that question. Was like I think it was kind of like an expression of masculinity
Mm-hmm.
for like someone who never lived up to the traditional masculine roles. So like I've never been a strong guy. When I was growing up, I've always been a little bit fearful. And then like the guitar and even the BMX. I used to BMX.
Nice.
Those become like this expression of your masculinity, and it's kind of there is like um there's an element of showing off to the opposite sex. Um, uh, uh, yeah, like my fitness. Like, look at me, like jumping around on my BMX. Look at me on this guitar, and it's very sexual. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, you're
Mm-hmm.
like putting your hand up and down on this thing, and like, do you know what I mean? Like, there's lots of like connotations there, isn't it? And
Mm.
um, yeah, like I did quite well with the girls at school. uh, when certainly when I started getting good on the guitar, because all of a sudden you're someone, like
Mm.
you've got something that's different to other people, um, and yeah, I think it just gives you like that social status
Mm.
where you kind of like, if you take like a bunch of 10 people and they've all got the same attributes, but that guy's like can shred to fuck on the guitar, you're like, yeah, that guy's cool. Um, and it's something like, ego and masks and stuff is something I'm always toying with. Like, even now, like, I don't really play music anymore. I've kind of stopped. And that's a whole other fucking conversation.
Hmm.
I have like a huge like mental block around that, and I don't know. there's some trauma wrapped up in it. I don't know. Maybe just like avoidance because it didn't work out for me. So I just won't play the guitar because
That's
like yeah,
that's
it can't hurt me.
well, when you say that, like it hit me right in the chest, and I really felt that because I went through some years like that as well. Something that I've said to a couple of people really close to me. I don't know if I've ever really shared this on a podcast or anything, but the biggest heartbreak of my life was a band that didn't work out.
Yeah.
I loved the music that we were playing so much, and the relationships with the people in the band. It was the epitome of toxic relationships, very high highs, very low lows, very stressful. The whole band was this like high highs, low lows. The music was incredible. People thought we were going somewhere. But the pressure was insane. All of us were very dysfunctional in our own ways. And, when I realized that I had to step away from that, when I realized that it was never going to become what I was hoping it would become, that there were things standing in the way of it that were just not going to change, and I had to let go. That was a huge heartbreak. And in a lot of ways, to some members of that band, I'm the villain in the story. I'm the villain in the story of that band because I'm the one who stepped away. I'm the one who essentially, who they would say broke up the band by leaving. In reality, they could have replaced me, but they didn't. Part of me is glad they didn't, because that would have been like another level of heartbreaking, seeing someone else take my place and try to continue with that band. And, there's always that thing, what if they'd succeeded where I'd failed? So it's this whole thing, and it's really complicated. But long story short, there was a period of years where all my guitars went into storage apart from maybe one that would just sit in the corner of my room, and I'd maybe pick it up once every now and then and put it down again. I'd stepped away from it for a long time. Finding my way back to it has been hard and but rewarding. So I really hope that you find your way back.
Thank you, mate. Yeah. No, it's nice to hear that, because like, not nice to be like, oh, thanks for your struggles. No, like, but like I said it to one of my mates the other day, who had actually been in a band with, by the way, little realization. I was like, all 4 of the bands I've been in, I've left them and broke them up. So I was like, oh, fucking hell. I just realized that when he was speaking. But anyways, and I said, I was talking about this, and he'd got a new guitar, and he was like, do you want to play it? Because like, without like being like big headed, he's like he knows I'm good. Like, so he actually asked my opinion on it. He was going to buy an electric. I said, he had like quite a bit of cash that had come to him for a certain reason. His mum had passed away, and he got some money, and he said, I wanted to treat myself. I'm thinking about getting this jazz master. And I was like, why the fuck would you? I was like, why don't you get like a gorgeous acoustic? Like, and he just literally just took what I said. So obviously he took my like opinion, and that was really nice. And he was like, I'm so happy with it, mate. Like, yeah, totally makes sense. Why would I have bought like because he doesn't play in bands anymore.
Yeah.
So what's the point having like a guitar? Like, it's so much nicer acoustic. You can just play it up. And he was like, do you want to play it? And I can't remember exactly what we were talking about, but he was sort of like taking the piss because I said something like, I've got this difficult relationship with the guitar.
I get it.
And I was like, yeah, I don't know. Like, and it was kind of like, oh, you got to, do you want to ever play on the guitar, or are you going to cry or something like that? Like, he wasn't being insensitive. We were just like joking around it, but it was hard because like I couldn't really express just how much of a difficult experience it is. And there'll be some people listening now being like, what the fuck? Like, this sounds well wanky. I can't play the guitar because I'm going to cry. But like, yeah, there's so many things wrapped up in it. We're going back now, and we're looking at like identity and ego and like competence and all these things that like it sort of colors. And just going back a second to what you were saying, like, well, if you look at like online dating, like some single online dating profile, and I would put out, the Jason I am today or whatever, and it might be like some pictures in the gym or a competition or whatever it is that I do these days. And it'll be okay. But then if I put in my profile a picture of me playing the guitar, my likes or matches will increase 30-40% just by having the picture of the guitar in.
Really? That never worked for me.
Really?
Like, what? What's
Yeah.
How were you taking these photos? Like,
yeah.
that's not.
But that's the thing, isn't it? And then it's like, so I'm like, oh, should I include the picture of me playing guitar? Because I can play the guitar. I'm pretty good on the guitar, but I don't really play the guitar anymore. And then it's like all these things about like self-worth and like, who am I without the guitar? Like, am I more valuable as a musician? Friends and family, and well, when are you going to pick up the guitar again? You should. Well, why don't you start the band again? You were so good, and all this. And then I know what they're saying, and again, it goes back to like the compliments around weight and stuff. It's kind of linked. It's like they're doing it out of like respect and complimenting me on like being a good musician, but also it kind of feels like, oh, like, so, like, what about like my podcast, or like, what about the stuff that I actually want to do?
Because they don't know the journey that you've had. Like, they're aware of some parts of it, but they might not be acutely acquainted with the full emotional journey and feelings and thoughts and how complicated that is. And it's an amazing parallel to draw between body image and complimenting and commenting people on body image. When we give someone a compliment, we have no idea what their journey with that thing has been. When we comment on something that is a part of someone else's life, we have no idea what their journey with that part of their life has really looked like. We have no idea why they might have stepped away from it. We have no idea if sticking with it is really serving them. So it's very complicated.
Yeah. I don't drink, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And as you were saying that, then like the reason I stepped away from it, I think it's that like party element. I think a lot of it is that. There's lots of other things, but that's a big part of it. It's very kind of it's like rushy, isn't it? And it's like almost like, and in like the recovery sort of sphere, it's kind of like you got to watch them like highs and I mean, even like working out and the rest of it and body image, they're all kind of, like we say, interlinked. And it's like, yeah, the late nights and stuff. And that's why I was kind of so in awe of what you were talking about with like your session musicianing, the session, like doing that, and you were just so disciplined. I'm like, fucking hell. And like when you were talking, I was imagining myself on the bus, and I was like, yeah, I'd want to get pissed.
Well, yeah, because it's boring. It's so boring sitting on the bus for so long. I remember some like seasoned session musicians that I came across at one point talking about how much they missed drugs because of the amount of downtime that they would have. You go to sound check, and then you drive for ages, and then you kind of go to sound check, and then you sit around waiting for whatever time you go on stage. Like, there's not enough time to really go and do anything. And you're not going to you might go to dinner somewhere or whatever, but there's not really enough time to go and do anything significant or occupy yourself with anything particularly fulfilling. So you're just like sitting around, and I remember them saying like, being sober is it's what we needed to do, but holy shit, I miss drugs.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel that. And yeah, hats off to like those guys that can just, yeah, for excuse the pun, but just like plug in and just be like professional. But yeah, it's so. I used to work in nightlife as well. I ran a music venue,
Mm-hmm.
so that didn't work out as well. So you can see there's like other things going on here with music, why I'm avoidant. And it's like there's the late nights and trying to get a routine in when you're working in something like hospitality,
Oh, yeah.
or it's essentially shift work,
Yeah.
so you're like um not allowing yourself like natural things, whether it be like sunlight in the morning and like these kind of circadian rhythms and stuff like that. So you're always fighting against this thing where like it's going to make it so much more difficult. I totally lost my train of thought there. All right.
But what you just said then, again, it spoke to me so much, because that was one of the reasons why I stopped.
Okay.
A really great friend of mine said probably the most insightful thing that I've ever heard anyone say about a career in music. She said, it'll give you everything you want, but nothing you need.
Yeah.
And I was like, wow, yeah, like it gives you all these kind of little luxuries and things that are kind of really cool on paper, while screwing up your sleep patterns, messing with your ability to maintain a great routine, taking you away from the people you care about, providing you with a lot of instability and uncertainty regarding things like income and your future and all that kind of stuff. It gives you a lot of things that are very cool on paper, a lot of things that you want, while limiting access to all the things that human beings really need in order to be deeply healthy and fulfilled.
Mm. Yeah. So that's why you decide to give it up.
Yeah, I just realized that the lifestyle that I was living, I wasn't, like you, I wasn't the leader of a band. I wasn't a songwriter. I wasn't, I was a session guy. And I realized that there's only kind of one kind of lifestyle that leads to. And I was living a version of it. And I just realized like, this is it. Like what I'm doing right now, I might end up working for a different band. Maybe I get paid a little more. But at the end of the day, if I choose this road as a permanent thing, what my life looks like right now is essentially what my life is going to look like permanently. And I that just didn't work for me. I'm like, I need something that I can build. I need something that I can work on. I need some freedom, some autonomy. I don't like working to other people's schedules, answering to people, acting, being at the beck and call of whoever needs me to show up for any given show. And, this whole thing of, oh, by the way, we're doing an entirely different set list at this show that we're playing in 24 hours. So you're going to need to learn this before we go on stage. Like, holy fuck. Like it didn't, when I tried to visualize what the future would look like for me if I stayed where I was, I'm like, no. So, yeah.
So what did you do after that?
I started from scratch. I got a job at a small startup gym in Brighton and started mopping the floors. I I just started from the ground up again, giving myself the kind of freedom to reflect on everything that I'd experienced and learnt over the last 10 years and see where it took me.
Wow. And then, like, how did you end up coming to eventually what you do now? Like, when did you start the podcast? Like, what's that road been like?
I started pulling on threads of difficult problems. So I was working as in that gym, fitness instructor, personal trainer, and I was noticing, like in every other job in the fitness industry that I'd had, that a small percentage of people were successful while the vast majority were struggling with very difficult problems and not getting the results that they walked into the gym to try and achieve.
Mhm.
And to me, that bothered me. I was like, there's something wrong with this. It's like, this doesn't do what it says it does on the box. Why is that? How can I change that? What do I need to focus on and get really good at helping people with in order to change that situation? And that essentially led to where I am now. The podcast started in 2021 after I started speaking out a bit more about struggles with food and body image. And a lovely gentleman who I met at one of the gyms that I worked at, reached out to me and kind of encouraged me to start a podcast. He's like, you need to talk about this more because there aren't many male voices in this space. We need more men talking about this. And what you're sharing is really valuable. You should start a podcast. And I respected this guy's opinion and advice. And I started a podcast, and I'm so grateful I did, because now it's the cornerstone of everything I do. It's the cornerstone of the platform that is Strong Not Starving.
Amazing. Tell to me about the name.
Essentially, it came from something that you were talking about before, being performance focused. One of the key things that helped me move away from struggling with food and body image and start to actually experience better things with training and nutrition and health, like more rewarding things, was focusing on performance more than physical appearance. So Strong Not Starving felt like a very obvious podcast name choice, platform name choice, because I was aiming to be strong physically, psychologically, emotionally, rather than starving nutritionally, emotionally, spiritually.
Yeah, it's good. I'm thinking, I'm thinking I might steal this hashtag strong not starving when I'm like rocking the dad bod.
Do it, because it'll send people to my stuff.
Yeah,
Like get that.
yeah,
Anyone who wants to use that hashtag, please.
yeah. It might
Use
get
the hashtag.
related with me doing topless erg workouts.
Well, it's funny because like we've seen, there are a couple of really big names in the fitness space that if we watch closely, they've gone on this journey. I'm thinking of one guy in particular. I don't want to name names because I'm not really into that, but he started in around 2020, 2021, just giving standard kind of weight loss advice. He then became very popular through, being kind of shredded and making the side of nutrition things simpler. And now he's kind of come full circle back to this whole idea of like, I don't want to live my life trying to be super lean all the time. And it's amazing how many, like when you've been in the industry for long enough, you see all these people, like these new generations of PTs and fitness professionals and everything come in, and there's like a fork in the road. Some of them choose to double down on perpetuating the idea that having a six pack and doing all that is where it's at. And others go, you know what? I don't know if this is actually worth the sacrifice involved. And they start trying to encourage people to be a bit more practical in terms of the expectations that they put on themselves and their results. And yeah.
Do you think it's necessary that people have to go through that evolution themselves?
Little
Like,
bit.
do they have to kind of like maybe like get to the point where they go, oh, actually, yeah, like I've got the six pack or whatever, but I'm still fucking miserable. Um, yeah, I think it reminds me of like, um, obviously it's a bit of a trope, but like money won't make you happy and all this, but the only people that are saying money won't make you happy are the people that have made fuckloads of it and then go, oh yeah, like it doesn't make you happy, or because they have the luxury to be able to say, yeah, I've done it. But for the rest of us, I can tell you now, I'm like, I can see how it's true, but I'm like, yeah, I'll find out myself. Thank you very much. Like, I will keep fucking charging towards that.
Dude, I hear you so much. And part of me thinks, yeah, like we're all on our own path, we're all on our own journey. I think some people, in terms of the body image stuff, need to achieve what it is they set out to achieve just to experience how miserable trying to maintain that actually
Mhm.
is. And there are other people like more, and there are other people who just realize that they're in so much pain, struggling so much, and still not where they want to be. So what the hell, you know? And sometimes that was more my path. Like I was never on the cover of Men's Health, you know?
Mm.
I periodically was in, magazine level good shape, but I could never maintain it. And I'm still in quote good shape now, like whatever that means, but a more sustainable version of that where I'm not aiming for the lowest possible body fat percentage at all times. And so, yeah, I think to some degree, we all do have to explore the territory ourselves and figure out what we feel first. Sometimes I say to people who call me, like, I'm usually the last person people call. I'm the person that people call when everything else has not worked. And I'm fine with that. It's
Mm.
okay. But as the eating disorder informed nutrition and stress management coach, people often call me last when all different other approaches have failed them. And I'm just like, that's okay. You needed to explore that in order to
Mm.
have conviction in what we're doing here now.
What does your coaching practice look like in terms of on like a practical level? Like, are you still doing some elements of PT? I imagine having that base was quite nice to be able to branch into the more niche stuff you're doing now. But tell me about how that's.
I spend a lot more time focusing on stress management and emotional management than I do getting into really granular sports science about training and nutrition. It's like the most basic nutrition and training principles work. They fucking work. We don't need to get so granular about nutrition and exactly the right weight training program. A basic approach will work. Why people, in my opinion at least, that the people who come to me, and it was true in my journey as well, why people start to think that, oh, this doesn't work, this basic stuff doesn't work, I need to make it more complicated, is because the area of stress management, emotional management, mindset, fulfillment, all that is being sacrificed or neglected on a level where it is compromising our effectiveness in the application of the very effective basics when it comes to nutrition and training. So if we take a little bit of the energy that we're investing in going down the rabbit hole with training and nutrition and instead go, all right, let's look at stress management, emotional management, communication, fulfillment, all those areas, then our outcomes in terms of training and nutrition improve. So that's the thing that I work with people a lot with, like in terms of we do a lot of work with emotional management, stress management, sometimes communication and relationships. But we look at life around food and the gym.
Okay. Thank you. And what about like what are the steps? What are the steps, if you can outline them, for someone to break free from binge eating?
The fundamental pillars of binge eating are emotional dysregulation, diet rigidity, and the overvaluation of weight and shape, in no particular order of appearance. Usually, if someone is struggling with binge eating, they're struggling with two or more of those things. So struggles with emotional regulation, often diets that are way too rigid or too restrictive, and overvaluing physical appearance. Now, this doesn't mean that we need to not care about how we look, because we're human and part of us is always going to be invested in our appearance. But the overvaluation, putting too much stock in how we look, causes a problem. So the first steps would be identifying where the problem is. Like, which of these three areas causes is most prominent or causes the biggest problem for you. And I've got screening exercises and a few things to help identify like where the key kind of problems are, because I get people coming to me saying things like, I know my diet is too strict, and I know that I'm fixating on my physical appearance, but emotional regulation isn't really a problem for me. Don't struggle with that at all. I'm fine. And then they'll do this screening tests, and something like emotional dysregulation will come up as the most prominent one. So the first thing we need to do before anything else is identify where the problem is. And then also get really well acquainted with what is not serving you, what's not working. Because before we start introducing solutions, we want to like just put aside the things that we can be absolutely clear that right now, in this point in time, they haven't worked before. They're not going to work if we keep doing it. So let's put them aside. It's like the first step of climbing out of a hole is to put down the shovel. You know? Stop digging. You know?
Sorry, I'm a bit slow on the uptake. Yeah.
That's all good.
Yeah, stop digging. Yeah, of course. All right. Thank you. Do you have any advice for a fellow podcaster?
I guess that's an interesting one. I don't actually do, like, I get a couple of people asking me about podcast stuff, and the main piece of advice that I would give is podcasting is just reps. Like, treat every episode just like another rep towards being able to record with less preparation. So if we look at maybe if the goal, I don't know about you, but my goal with podcasting is to get so good at it that I can write a few dot points in about 5 or 10 minutes and then just speak into a mic about those dot points and then do a quick edit and put out the episode. When I first started, I would spend 4 to 5 hours writing out the script and the plan for the episode. I would spend another couple of hours trying to record it and making sure that I was sounding good and everything like that. And then I was really slow at editing, so I'd spend another couple of hours. It would take an entire day to do one episode. And people would say to me, I just write out dot points and speak, just speak, just let go, just speak. And I was like, fuck, like that comes with time. I wish someone had told me, like, just get the reps in. The more you do this, the faster you get at it. And there is no secret hack or secret formula. Just get the reps in. Don't worry about overcomplicating it, and it will get better. If you repeat it, if you do the reps, it's impossible for it to not get better. So that's I don't know. You seem like a pretty good podcaster already, so I don't know what advice I would have to give really, but that was just a
Appreciate
big
the
stumbling
compliment.
point for me.
Yeah, I mean, this is what are we on now? Like, this is maybe episode 30, I think.
Nice.
And I've been doing it over a year, but publishing weekly since about April. One a week, one a week, one a week, one a week. And it has been like difficult recently. I think because like I've gone into like a heavy training phase with the competition in October. So it's like we talk about periodization a lot. And like I had like my podcast period at the beginning of the year, and my training was kind of like, I'd half an eye on it. And then but yeah, and then the year before, like I had my training period with no podcasting, and now they've both kind of started coming together. Where I'm in in this period of going right. Well, the podcast like is kind of like doing quite well at the moment. I need to like keep on with that. Like maybe I need to start doing more content. Maybe I need to like push my Instagram more. But I'm like, well, like what's the goal right now? Well, my goal is kind of like the High Rocks thing, like my competition, and I think I need to like remember like it's like in terms of like my main goals, like what do I need to maintain and what do I need to push on with?
Mm-hmm.
So I think for me, like at the moment, the podcast, it's like a maintenance phase. It's just like, just keep them coming.
Yeah.
Just keep them coming. Like, don't stress about it. If you're going to stress about anything, stress about the training.
Yeah.
But obviously, don't stress. But no, I appreciate that. Like, it is totally just a reps thing, isn't it? And my preparation and stuff constantly changes, and like, I mean, I've really enjoyed this conversation, and obviously
Me too.
we're bringing this to an end now. But one of the things, like I've got like a fucking list of all these questions, which I like always prepare. I didn't ask most of them, but I always think like the best conversations I have is when I can just like stay present with the guest and kind of like, oh, what's that? Let's go down that route. What's that? Let's go
Yeah,
down
man.
that route. And that's a skill that I'm really trying to learn. Of just being, and it's like you said before, it's like letting go
Yeah.
of like control, and just like taking it, because that's like another like theme with my podcast is like authenticity, like fucking scary, like extreme authenticity, and
Nice.
just like, and this is what I try to have throughout all my conversations. So I've really enjoyed this, and I appreciate your vulnerability in like some of the stuff you tapped into.
Dude, I've really enjoyed chatting with you. It's super nice to meet you, and thank you for the invitation. And yeah, I really enjoyed this.
Awesome. Do you have like what are your plans like for the next like few years? You got any like anything upcoming? Is it? Don't tell me
Yeah.
about that.
So the podcast, it's the cornerstone of what I do, so it's always going to stay. I'm doing my best to create some helpful YouTube content, though that has been put on hold for a moment because people are asking me for a book. So I'm sussing out what it would be to put like a book together. I'm writing material for a book that's not going to be like a traditional read it from start to finish book. It's more going to be like a workbook with different exercises and activities and things to do, with some helpful information in it. And I'm going to include a whole bunch of notes about things that have come up in real sessions with clients, like things that people bring up. So the idea is like, the book itself is like a really helpful companion to the podcast and YouTube, though I don't know how long that's going to take. Like anyone who's written a book, I've underestimated what goes into that and how long it takes. But the podcast is going to keep going. I'm doing my best to put some helpful stuff out on YouTube. And the other big thing that's going on is more live events. So I'm doing some collaboration with a few really cool people around workshops. And in those workshops, I'm kind of the guy that they call on for topics like emotional eating, stress management, all that kind of thing. So yeah, there's more private workshops that I'm running in the next 12 months. And yeah, that's kind of what's going on. And my one-to-one coaching is always going on in the background as well. I'm always going to have a certain number of sessions available in my diary for one-to-one coaching, because I think that's a really valuable thing. It's an experience, like one-to-one coaching and that kind of private work. It's a unique experience that you don't get from a workshop or working in a group even. So I want there to be a certain number of hours that are dedicated to that. And as well, it in a way, like I see that as continual development for me as a coach and a professional as well. I don't ever want to be one of those people that closes off all their one-to-one coaching and stops working with people and then starts to become a little bit detached from the original problem. I see that happening quite a bit with people that get kind of like out of touch. So yeah, that's my goal for the next few years.
Awesome. That sounds exciting. I shall look out for the book and all the other things you got going on. Where do you want to direct people if they want to get in touch and check out any stuff?
The Strong Not Starving podcast is probably the best place to start. I've got a website as well, strongnot.starving.com, that's being rebuilt at the moment. My Instagram, again, Strong Not Starving, that's available too. But though Instagram algorithms don't love my Instagram was growing really fast for a while there, but then some stuff changed and now it doesn't really reach as many people as it could. So really the podcast is where the most valuable content is, and YouTube is coming up to kind of replace Instagram for me as well.
Yeah, I was thinking about that before actually with like, I was just in my head thinking about like thumbnails and episode titles. And I was like, oh yeah, like you've got to be careful with the algorithm. Like they don't like certain things. And I've had this with like conversations about like BDSM and like sex and stuff. And it will just get throttled by the algorithm because it sees it as explicit or triggering or whatever. But, yeah, thank you for that. I will put it all in the show notes so people can go down and check that out. And I encourage that they do so. Thank you so much, Marcus. I've really appreciated this. And have an awesome afternoon, whatever you're up to.
Thanks, Jason. Awesome to meet you and chat with you, man.
Hey guys, it's me. Thank you so much for watching that episode and congratulations for making it all the way to the end. I really appreciate it. A few things before you get going. If you haven't already, please do subscribe. And if you enjoyed this episode, the kindest thing you can do for me is to share it with a friend or family member. Don't forget to check out the show notes for links to both my guests and myself. And if you made it this far, why don't you drop me a DM?